Good morning. Today on Spotlight, the start of a new and historic chapter in American political history. The swearing in of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the oldest president ever, and the nation's first female Black and Asian American vice president. Did the new commander-in-chief set the right tone toward healing the very partisan divide in this nation in his inaugural address? I'll ask Aaron Kall, Director of Debate at the University of Michigan and the author of I Do Solemnly Swear, Presidential Inaugural Addresses of the Last 5 Decades.
Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. To overcome these challenges, restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity.
And later on our Sunday morning program, meet Dr. Matthew Johnson, the brand new president of that purple and bold Albion College in mid-Michigan. It's Sunday, January the 24th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. All right, you're the expert on inaugural addresses. You've written a book that goes back looking at them for the last 5 decades. Rank the one that you just heard from new President Joe Biden.
Yes, it's a little too early to know for sure, but I would say of the last 5 decades, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama probably had the best addresses, and I would rank Biden's just after them as of now. But in a few years or decades, there could certainly be a different ranking.
Sure. Joe Biden even said it in his address that words alone can't do what he has set out he needs to do. But how important are words in these inaugural addresses for setting the tone of where an administration wants to go?
Oh, it's essential. And the inaugural address is only 15 or 20 minutes, but it sets the tone of an entire presidency. And it's, the day one, but there are going to be other things going forward, such as an address to the joint session of Congress that's coming up in about a month. And the first 100 days is usually a honeymoon period for these presidencies. And the tone that he set, trying to defeat the pandemic, working out across the aisle, unity, those things are going to be major themes of the entire 4-year presidency. And so you definitely want to get off to a good start.
Aaron Kall, what did you hear in that speech that you liked, first of all? And as you said, you have to get a message across in a short period of time. It's something you do with your debate team, but sort of dissect it a little bit for me.
Yeah, I thought the speech really met the moment of our country, what it's going through. There have been previous presidents. Abraham Lincoln gave a few inaugural addresses surrounding the Civil War, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt during the Great Depression and on the precipice of World War II. And so it was somber in a way, talking about what the country has faced, the pandemic for the last year, the storming of the Capitol just 2 weeks ago. And a lot of times, just even more than the speech itself, it's what accurately gauging the mood of the country and making sure that his speech reflects that. And in the speech, he paid tribute to George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. There was even a slight reference to the inaugural address of John F. Kennedy. So it was reserved a little bit, but I think that's appropriate with what's going on in the country.
Mm-hmm. As you look back on past inaugural addresses and this current one, is there always the danger of setting the bar too high? Certainly, the new president said that he wants to heal this country, a very partisan country right now. He wants to bring everyone together. Some people I've heard since the inaugural say, yeah, sounds good, but man, the realistic chances of doing that are slim to none. But do you have to go to that higher plane?
Yes, I think you do have to face something like this head on, especially what happened in the Capitol. But I do think that he did hedge a little bit in the address, where he said that, I'm under no illusions. This isn't going to be easy. And so it's definitely good to qualify it in that way because, as you mentioned, the country is very divided. Barack Obama tried to do the same thing in his 2009 address. He wanted to turn the page and he called it a new era. And many presidents have tried to do it. And we remain politically divided as possible, just going back to 20 years after the contested Bush versus Gore and the really close election in Florida. And it seems like divisions have only gotten greater, and the media in some ways has increased those divisions. And so it's going to be tough. I don't think he's under any illusion, but certainly you have to attempt to try it. And he said that he'd be the president for everybody, even the 74 million people that didn't vote for him. And he seemed genuine and authentic in his appeal to, not worry about if people are in red and blue states and be a president for everybody. And we'll see how he ends up governing. Actions are always louder than words. Historians, when they look at the speech, it'll be judged based on the accomplishments and how successful the presidency and the agenda was.
Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. This is Democracy's Day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis. We must end this uncivil war.
President Biden did not mention President Trump in his inaugural address. Was that a mistake or the right action?
It was definitely unique, but I don't think it was a mistake given the circumstances. President Trump was the first president in over 150 years since Andrew Johnson not to attend the address. And so since that was the case, it's tough to talk about somebody that's not there, that was on a flight to Mar-a-Lago at the same time. And given what happened at the Capitol, I think that also made it less likely that he was going to mention him. He did point out that Vice President Mike Pence was in attendance, and I was a little surprised he didn't maybe mention a few nice words on Vice President Pence's part, talking about how he handled the very controversial counting of electoral votes in the Capitol, given everything that happened. So that was a little bit surprising. But yes, it's been a tradition going back to Jimmy Carter. Most presidents have always thanked their predecessors for their service and their aid in the transition process, and a few have not. Ronald Reagan did not. President Trump really did not thank President Obama for his service. But given how rocky the transition was and the election was so closely contested and a lot of the norms went out the window, it wasn't all too surprising that that exact mention did not occur in the inaugural address.
Because of the historic nature of Kamala Harris, and certainly President Biden referenced her in his remarks, how important is that in terms of the two of them walking in sync with the same message if they want to achieve the things that he said he wants to lay out?
Oh, very important. And especially given the Senate control being 50-50, Kamala Harris is likely to be passing a lot of tie-breaking votes in order to pass the important legislation of the agenda. And so, yes, as you mentioned, he talked about the historical significance, and I think it made the inauguration that much more special given the historical nature. And also he alluded to Martin Luther King and just the setting with the west front of the Capitol being in front of the National Mall. It was a little bit different this year because the National Mall was closed and all the security precautions. You didn't have the millions of people there like we saw with 2009 and President Obama. But nevertheless, still, the words he said and the tribute he paid did make it very special because this was the first time in history such a thing occurred.
All right, Aaron Kall, director of the University of Michigan debate team and the author of I Solemnly Swear Presidential Addresses, going back for the last 5 decades. Thanks for checking in with us, and we'll stay in touch with you as we just begin this new presidency and new leadership for the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks,
you. Always good talking to you. And coming up, we will introduce you to the brand new president of Albion College in mid-Michigan. We'll be right back. Dr. Johnson, thank you for joining us today in Spotlight, your first interview with us, and sort of a newcomer to Michigan, but we're glad to have you here. You're the 17th president of Albion College. What in the world does it feel like taking over a college in the middle of COVID-19?
It's a challenge for sure. when I decided to try and become a college president and enter the search process, a mentor of mine who's a college president told me that, you know a lot about higher ed because you've been a professor and a dean and other things for a long time. But when you become a college president, it's like landing on Mars. It's still a planet. It's round. It's got rocks on it, but it's very different from the president's vantage point. And I called him the other day and said, yeah, but you didn't tell me an asteroid was about to hit the planet. And
That's probably a good description. Well, welcome aboard and best of luck to you. How different is Albion from Brown University there in Providence, Rhode Island?
It's somewhat different, but college students are college students. They're bright and wide-eyed and idealistic and thinking about the future and trying to figure out their place in the world. So in some ways, it's not that different than Brown. In other ways, it is different. Brown sits in a city, Providence, Rhode Island, sort of it is the capital of Rhode Island, a city-state in many ways, such a small state. Albion sits in a small community, less than 8,000 people, deindustrialized community that's on hard times economically. And so the future of the community and the college are knitted tightly together. And that's wonderful in many ways. I've already met so many of my neighbors and been welcomed to the community. And it gives our students a great opportunity to engage in the world outside of campus while they're here at the college.
What do you hope to accomplish? What, during your tenure, would you like to champion there at Albion?
Well, I've really staked out some terrain in my presidency already for addressing the needs of folks who've been marginalized. We've shifted from a student population that was 15% non-white to now almost 50%. And that means we need to rethink the way we deliver and construct and imagine higher education. It's not appropriate for us to talk about students being ready for college. We need to talk about how to get the college ready for students. And so that means reimagining the way we teach, the courses we offer, the supports we provide for students who come to our doors to make sure they are successful and go out into the world and continue the great work that our alumni already do.
I know that you're very proud of the Promise program that you have there at Albion College. That's certainly something that your predecessor worked on a great deal. And I know in talking with Dr. Wilson, one of your famous graduates now at the University of Pennsylvania working on this COVID-19 vaccine, he's also talked about it. Do you want to expand that, continue that, or add something else in place or in addition to?
So we have already expanded it for this coming year. We'll continue to work to expand that program. That program means that students who are coming from families whose annual income is less than $65,000 will have free tuition here at Albion College. And we're committed to serving those first generation and low income students from across Michigan. We're now thinking about how we might do the same or similar for students who may be frontline workers in partnership with the governor's initiative to make sure that those who have served us so well and so heroically across this pandemic have an access to an Albion education. And finally, we've been working on and thinking through how we can provide a pathway for the million Michiganders who have some college credit but currently no path to a complete degree. So look for new programs coming out from the college in the future to address those needs.
How has Albion been navigating its way through COVID-19?
We will test as we did last semester. Last semester, we administered 14,000 tests for our 1,500 students and 500 employees and a variety of other collaborating businesses. This coming semester, we anticipate administering even more tests because we'll be moving to the Abbott test, which is faster and cheaper. And so we'll administer even more tests. We think testing is the way to go, and it was quite successful in the fall. We sent students home a few days early because of outbreaks in the broader community, not on campus. So students complied well with our public health protocols, and we did a lot of testing, and we'll do it again.
All right, we need to take a quick little break. Stay right there. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about your involvement with the Carnegie Foundation and all the community engagement background that you have. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Dr. Johnson, you spent a considerable amount of time with the Carnegie Foundation, and you were involved with something called, was it Elective Classic Community Engagement? That's quite a title. What is that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tongue twister. So the Carnegie Foundation is the foundation that has really stewarded the development of higher education for the last century, really, in the United States. And they developed a classification for higher ed institutions to apply for. It's like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval for institutions to show they're doing the highest and best practices in community engagement. That is helping their students and faculty engage in the community around the institution and address needs in those communities. So I've been working with the foundation for a number of years to run that competition every few years and to develop it even more broadly. Now we're working in Canada and Australia and South Africa to offer the same classification in those parts of the world. And we've partnered with Rice University to develop a new classification around leadership education. And we hope to develop a new one around racial equity soon as well.
We just witnessed one of the most divisive political elections in the history of this nation. We know that there's a strong division in this country between political parties and ideology. And everybody is now asking the question, where does America go from here? I would imagine community engagement is sort of at the base of all that.
It is at the base of all that. Community engagement is the primary mechanism that we most successfully expose students to the complexities of community life. It's the primary mechanism where we most successfully teach students about the civic infrastructure of our communities. And when students don't learn about that civic infrastructure, they end up in situations like we saw on the TV a few days ago relative to folks taking things into their own hands instead of using the mechanisms of civic change that have worked so effectively for our democracy for so long. So it's of utmost importance for institutions of higher ed to give students the opportunity to learn those civic skills. In terms of diversity and inclusion, there's almost no better setting to do that than in the wider community where students get to work with folks who may be different from them. In fact, what we've seen from some of the studies is that students who come from marginalized backgrounds are more academically successful when they get to do community engagement, and students who come from non-marginalized backgrounds have far greater learning gains with regard to empathy and civic skills when they're able to engage with folks who are not like them in the outside world.
I know that you've worked very closely in the short span of time that you've been there, but this new idea in terms of what you're revamping the medical school there, those going into medicine, but are there, in addition to that, are there other areas that you would like to see either come to the campus or grow more?
Yeah, in fact, I'm working with the faculty right now on a new exciting opportunity for every student on campus to add to their degree a certificate. And a certificate would help a student articulate what they're passionate about. They would choose 250 hours of professional development and 1,000 hours of experiential learning so that they would get a co-curricular transcript. They would graduate with their academic transcript and a co-curricular transcript, which would show an employer or graduate school what they are able to do with what they have learned in the liberal arts. It's really putting the liberal arts into active practice, applied learning.
We need to take one more quick little break. We'll come right back with a few more final questions with Dr. Matthew Johnson. We'll be right back. Stay with us. President Johnson, sort of a philosophical question. What do you think college students are looking for today?
You know, that's a great question, and there's a lot of research out there about what college students are looking for. Some of the research suggests that they're looking for sort of a guaranteed job at the end. You know, what job am I going to be able to get if I go to college? My experience is that that's more driven by parents than it is by students.
You better believe it. As someone who put kids through college, that's the question I always ask.
I went to college myself, and I think about that a lot. But when I talk to incoming freshmen or prospective students, what I hear them most concerned about is the state of the world. I hear them asking questions like, how can this education help me save the environment? How can this education help me rebuild the government? How can this education help me work towards racial healing? What I hear from the incoming generation is hope and optimism and a responsibility they feel for fixing what they see as broken in the world. And that gives me tremendous hope for the next generation. I think there's a much higher level of sophistication in the students who are coming to us today about these social and political issues. Look at the data, and the data will tell you that small liberal arts colleges prepare students for the most successful, most meaningful lives, and actually end up in jobs with the highest incomes overall. It takes a while for them to get there, a little bit longer than it takes a business graduate, for example, to start making significant income. But over the long haul, it's the liberal arts majors who end up as the CEOs, as the political leaders, and as the folks who are making the greatest impacts on the world. So send your students to small liberal arts colleges like Albion, and we'll make you proud. When I talk to legislators and public officials, what I try and impart to them is an understanding that we play a vital role in our communities, that we are really anchor institutions. And for many of us, particularly here in Michigan, the small colleges really are the primary employer and the primary economic engine in our small communities. And so even though we may be private, we play a significant public role. And I need legislators and other politicians to understand that.
And what do you and your colleagues of college presidents that you know at other institutions, what keeps you up at night? What do you worry about the most?
I think part of what we worry about the most here in Michigan are the demographic changes. You know, the number of students graduating from high school continues to decline. And so we are all working on how do we attract students from other states to come to beautiful Michigan and do their education here. Some of us are talking about this sort of not as far as you think we are kind of campaign with our wonderful airport in Detroit and other connectors, Amtrak, to other places in the country. But that's, I think, the thing that we're up most at night thinking about is how do we attract people to the wonderful education we can provide here in Michigan.
Dr. Matthew Johnson, thanks so much for spending some time with us today on Spotlight. Next time you get to Detroit, once we get past all this COVID stuff and we can actually physically shake hands with people, we hope that you stop in here at the station so that we could actually meet you in person and not just virtually.
Would love to do that.
All right. Thank you so much, and best of luck there on campus navigating through COVID-19 and all the other challenges.
Take care, Chuck.
Take care. Thanks to Aaron Kall and Dr. Johnson, our guest today on Spotlight. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the Spotlight. We hope you have a great week.